Greetings and welcome back. We are in sophomore English, and our objective now for the hour is to work with Elizabeth Bishop's classic poem, The Fish, on page 714. Let's go ahead now and identify a couple of quick observations before we then go to a listening of this poem read professionally. If you've already looked at the biography of Bishop on page 713, you know that it is marked, as the textbook says, by its exact and tranquil descriptions of, you'll want this in your notes, the physical world. Bishop was very interested in drawing understandings from the very world of nature itself, as you will see in this poem. Some of you maybe are kind of addicted to the enjoyment of fishing, and if you are, then you'll have a certain kind of perspective as well of this poem, right? Serenity, simplicity, also words that are used in the biography. Underlying themes of great depth, no pun intended, given that we're about to work with the fish. When writing about loss and pain, the struggle to belong, and other themes, Bishop worked hard to ensure the spiritual was felt, and we will certainly engage in that level here. I want to make a point before we listen to this poem read out loud. This poem will describe a very kind of normal situation, but we will, as readers, identify there's something else going on beneath the surface. No pun intended here. We're making all kinds of, angular kinds of observations, right? Beneath the surface. Let's begin, first of all, by listening to a reading of the poem. Go ahead and go to it on 714, and we'll have the professional reader now do his job.
Have you ever watched an animal and imagined you understood its thoughts? You are about to read 3 poems: The Fish by Elizabeth Bishop, Christmas Sparrow by Billy Collins, and The Sloth by Theodore Roethke. In each poem, the speaker shares observations of an animal that seems to exhibit human traits. As you read, listen for the details the speaker includes to make the poem's subject come to life.
I caught a tremendous fish and held him beside the boat half out of the water, with my hook fast in the corner of his mouth. He didn't fight. He hadn't fought at all. He hung a grunting weight, battered and venerable and homely. Here and there, his brown skin hung in strips like ancient wallpaper, and its pattern of darker brown was like wallpaper, shapes like full-blown roses stained and lost through age. He was speckled with barnacles, fine rosettes of lime, and infested with tiny white sea lice, and underneath, 2 or 3 racks of green weed hung down. While his gills were breathing in the terrible oxygen, the frightening gills fresh and crisp with blood that can cut so badly, I thought of the coarse white flesh packed in like feathers, the big bones and the little bones, the dramatic reds and blacks of his shiny entrails, and the pink swim bladder like a big peony. I looked into his eyes, which were far larger than mine, but shallower and yellowed, the irises backed and packed with tarnished tinfoil seen through the lenses of old scratch isinglass. They shifted a little, but not to return my stare. It was more like the tipping of an object toward the light. I admired his sullen face, the mechanism of his jaw, and then I saw that from his lower lip, if you could call it a lip, grim, wet, and weapon-like, hung 5 old pieces of fish line, or 4 and a wire leader with the swivel still attached, with all their 5 big hooks grown firmly in his mouth. A green line frayed at the end where he broke it, 2 heavier lines, and a fine black thread still crimped from the strain and snap when it broke and he got away. Like metals with their ribbons frayed and wavering, a 5-haired beard of wisdom trailing from his aching jaw. I stared and stared, and victory filled up the little rented boat, from the pool of bilge where oil had spread, a rainbow around the rusted engine to the bailer rusted orange. The sun cracked thwarts, the oarlocks on their strings, the gunnels, until everything was rainbow, rainbow, rainbow. And I let the fish go.
Now, of the poems that we've studied to date in this anthology, I could argue probably that this Bishop offering is considered the most important. certainly the most anthologized, and is going to receive some pretty serious criticism. By criticism here, we mean celebrating, not demeaning, right, the text. Let's take a look at this poem now as a pretty remarkable offering. And for those of you who are young poets-to-be, that is to say, you maybe want to really try to produce 5 pieces of writing for the Young Authors Competition that is competitive, as poets would write. Let's maybe try to learn something from Bishop's offering here. What is it that she does? I want to begin by first of all pointing out that she will solicit. There's a famous way we say this: show, don't tell. When you write poetry, show, don't tell. There is, notice, an attempt to try to solicit all of the senses early on. Notice early in this poem, all she does is say, I caught a tremendous fish, and then she describes the fish. Notice the degree of speculative accuracy. She tries to be exact. Find for your notes what is for you, in the first, 30 or so lines, what is for you the most remarkable specific observation about the fish. She gets very specific, soliciting what you can see, touch, taste, etc., etc. What is for you the most remarkable? I mean, you are kind of identified with it. Now, I have students that say, you really can't read this poem until you've held a trout in your own hands. I mean, you can see them, and it doesn't mean anything. But when you finally hold a trout in your hands, you understand what an amazing miracle this life form is, both in terms of the way it looks, as well as the tremendous power. Even a small trout or brookie can actually be remarkably strong and powerful in the hand if you don't know how to hold it well. Notice the references made as well to gills that can cut your hand depending on the size of the fish. By the way, how big is this fish?
Pretty big.
It's a huge fish, isn't it? Keep going. What else are we going to say about this fish in terms of its age? It's an old fish. Good. Notice she likes the idea of wallpaper as a descriptor of what the skin of this fish maybe looks like. The fish, we find out, has been caught before. Now this is significant. The fish has been caught before. How does the speaker of the poem, we can assume that it's Bishop, but it needn't necessarily be. How does the speaker of the poem know that the fish has been caught before? There's evidence, isn't there? Yes. Now see, if you don't know fishing, this maybe makes no sense to you. But if you know fishing, you understand that this fish has lead or line that's hanging from its, she says, if you want to call it a jaw. Why do you think she says it that way? The jaw of the fish is starting to deteriorate, right? The fish is so old. What does it mean that there's this stuff hanging from those of you who have fished before? What does that mean? You can deduce, meaning what? The fish was caught and got away how? By literally pulling away from the line, the test line. Now to do that requires tremendous strength. I mean, if you just take test line and wrap it around your finger several times and try and pull it apart by snapping, normally what you do is what? You normally cut your finger. You cut your own flesh. It takes a pretty strong grip to be able to pull apart line that this fish has, how many times? 5 different times this fish has been caught and has somehow escaped over the course of years. Now, up to roughly, as we're talking here, up to roughly line 45 or so, all that's talked about is what the fish looks like as he or she, the speaker of the poem, is standing next to the boat holding this amazing fish, right? Notice I admired his sullen face, the mechanism of his jaw. And then I saw, notice the shift in the poem. The poem begins to shift from the fish to the speaker of the poem. Notice the gradual movement. And then I saw that from his lower lip, if you could call it a lip, grim, wet, and weapon-like, hung 5 old pieces of fish line or 4 in a wire leader with the swivel still attached, and all their 5 big hooks grown firmly in his mouth. What does it mean that they've grown in his mouth? Yeah, this is a long time ago. In other words, this fish has been swimming and getting caught and breaking away and swimming for a really long time. A green line frayed at the end where he broke it. Notice her attention to detail. Don't just say in your poem there's a flower. Name the kind of flower. Be specific as you start to identify your nouns. Don't use general nouns. Use specific nouns as a poet. Notice then she says, or the bishop says, like medals. What does that mean? What does that simile mean to you? These lines are like trophies. In what regards? Normally, what do people do if they catch a really large fish? They mount it and put it up as a trophy. Notice the swish here. This fish has trophies. These things hanging. It's as if the fish has been able to escape over and over again. What kind of adjective will you use for this fish then? What will you say about this fish?
Sneaky.
Sneaky. Keep going.
Clever.
I'm sorry?
Clever.
Clever. Keep going.
Wise.
Strong. Wise. What other adjectives would you like to use?
Experienced.
Experience. That's a good one, isn't it? Experienced. Skilled comes to mind. Some will say courageous. Some will say a fighter, right? Refuses to be caught over and over again. Refuses to be caught. Fighting against the inevitability of age. Fighting against the inevitability of ultimately being caught. Somehow this fish refuses. Line 65 then begins our final movement. I stared and stared. At what? Looking at the fish. And victory filled up the little rented boat. What? This is a poetic way to say what? Right. It slowly starts to dawn on the he or the she who has caught this fish. Whoa, whoa.
They caught an uncatchable fish.
Right. I have caught the uncatchable fish. It's taken a long time, but finally this fish has been landed. Others who came before couldn't do it. I've done it. Victory fills up the little, what does it tell you? The rented boat? See, Bishop's brilliant about little stuff. Right. Well done, Miller. Brilliant. Yes. This rented boat thing reference seems to suggest that our fisherman or woman probably is not adept, probably not an expert at this. Oh, what the hey, let's go fishing. I'll rent a little boat and go out and, oh, this fish is kind of hard to catch. Whoa, this is a really beautiful old fish. Whoa, this fish has been caught. Oh, I caught what, see, victory fills up the boat. Where oil had spread, notice a rainbow. Now, of course, you have to know fish to be able to appreciate that Bishop would use the word rainbow at this point, right? Around the rusted engine to the baler rusted orange. The sun cracked thwarts, the oak locks on their strings and gunnels until everything was rainbow, rainbow, rainbow. Again, if you don't know fish, this doesn't make much sense in regards to rainbow. Before we get to that final line, which will obviously be the primary point of the entire poem, right? It's what's going to lead us to our fight, if not debate. What do you want to say about the whole thing of rainbow, rainbow, rainbow? What does it mean to you? It's hard when you're reading this poem publicly to know how to interpret those lines. Our reader, for example, noticed crescendoed with rainbow, 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 right? That kind of like, what does the word rainbow start to represent almost?
Victory.
That's the word, isn't it? Victory, victory, victory. In other words, yes, I did it, right? And then the final line. What? Wait a minute. Let the fish go? Now, what do you want to say about that?
For another chance.
What kinds, let me ask it this way, at 2:8. What kinds of questions could you ask about this line? Jot them down real quickly. What are some of the questions? I mean, if you're up here leading the discussion about this poem, and all of a sudden you hit this final line. Dude, we read 76 lines to find out 2 pieces of information. One, the speaker of the poem, let's call her a she, shall we? She lands this amazing fish to... She lets it go. What kind of questions might we want to ask to set up a conversation about this poem?
Why let the fish go?
Why? Why would the fish need to be released? We may be, all right, we might be in a situation, where a catch and release is required. We kind of assume not, though. This seems to be a choice that the speaker makes. I decided to let the fish go. One of the obvious questions is, really? Why would you do that? At the moment you've caught the uncatchable fish, would you say, let it go? Keep going. What are other questions before we actually get to answering any of these? Ms. Myers.
Was this person actually planning on keeping any of the fish?
Right. What's the motivation behind the fisherman or fisherwoman's actions in the first place? Is this person there to catch a fish? Or is this person there for some other reason? Or does this person start to understand that only after the fish is caught? Why do you think the individual lets the fish go? Jot down in your notes, what's to be gained by going back and saying, dude, I caught this amazing... Oh, wait a minute. That may have been what Bishop did. She goes back and writes a poem about it. And then she says, I caught this unbelievable fish. Oh, really? Well, let's see it. Yeah, I kind of let it go. I'm sorry, you what? The fish that clearly nobody else could land, and you let it go? Like, why? Why do you think the speaker of the poem lets the fish go? I've had students that say, there ain't no way if I'm landing a fish like this, no way I'm letting the fish go. That's the whole point of fishing. The whole point of fishing is to find a fish that nobody else can catch and then celebrate that find through the mounting or the trophy mounting of the fish so that I can then talk about it. And when I mount it, I certainly am going to leave not only the 5 hooks and lines in the mouth, I'm going to leave mine there as well. Why in heaven's name would you put the fish back in the water? By the way, there are a lot of answers to this. Sometimes students say, there can't be any answer to this. That's just insane. But there are a lot of answers to this, and Bishop wants us to think about them. Why would you put the fish back in the water? Customs.
She could have, I don't know, it seemed the way the poem kind of started to shift, that she may have taken on some sort of identification with the situation that this fish was in.
Ah, this is brilliant observation by Costalis. Something seems to happen between the, notice opening line, I caught a tremendous fish. Holding it up going, whoa, this is an old fish. Whoa, oh, whoa, this is a fighter fish, and I caught it. Amazing, I did it, victory, rainbow, rainbow, rainbow. I let it go. Costalis seems to suggest there's almost like a movement or a trajectory. There is an understanding that seems to happen. Maybe an identification with the old fish. How could there be an identification with the old fish, do you think? What kinds of identification could be made?
Well, maybe she saw like something about it that reminded her of herself.
There you go. In what ways? What's the most obvious way?
Fighter.
Yeah.
She may be a fighter herself. Keep going. I'm just thinking about the age of the fish. Right. No matter how old the fisher person is who caught the fish, there's a realization that, uh-oh, right? Someday, I'm not going to be so young anymore. Whoa, someday I'm going to be like this old fish. What's it like to become an old fish? What's it like to have your children walk up to you, one of your kids walk up to you and say, yeah, honey, I love you, but you ain't going to drive the car no more. I need your keys. And you go to your kid, what do you mean you need my keys? Yeah, we can't have you drive anymore. It's just not a good idea. If you need to go someplace, you need to just call and ask us, and one of us will take you to the store. What will that be like when that moment happens for you? You tell this kid what?
Before you go home.
Fascinating. Thanks, guys. Come back tomorrow. We'll chat tomorrow.